All right, guys, Joe Richardson, Joe Speak Podcast. I always say that I've got a good one, but I really, really mean it this time. I've got the guy who not only makes me want to be a better lawyer, but the guy who made me want to be a legal commentator. I can say a lot of things, CNN commentator, head of Joey Jackson Law, PLLC. You balling when you got 4 letters. The man himself on CNN. I check him out almost every day now, but it has done some of everything. The fantastic Joey Jackson. Mr. Jackson, how are you, sir?
Not nearly as good as you. That's the first thing. Second thing is listen, the standards of how I'm doing have dropped significantly. Why? I hate to bring COVID back into play, but that taught me so much perspective. There are things I used to whine about and cry about and be concerned about. I'm just glad that I get to wake up, go outside, breathe fresh air, be around people again, shake hands with people. So life is beautiful. Family's good. I'm good. What else can I say?
It'll put everything in perspective in a hurry, won't it?
It really does, without question.
One of the things that was interesting when we met, and thanks again for meeting with me a few months ago when we were in New York, was that, for someone who's been as successful in the law as you have and done the things that you have, it wasn't exactly cast in the wool that you were going to be a lawyer. This whole career kind of snuck up on you, didn't it?
It really did. Every day is a blessing, as I noted, to wake up and to just have gratitude. I was not a child of privilege or anything else, and I grew up in the Bronx, nice middle-class family. My dad was a police officer, and then he went to work for the fire department. My mom being a nurse. I have a wonderful older brother and sister who took great care of me, and we took great care of each other. But I, like any kid, got involved in all kind of things, that if one thing would have went to the left or to the right, who knows what life would have been like. But I just didn't really have a sense of purpose and direction until I was about 18 or so. And at that time, I met a lawyer when I went to college, and I made a decision that I was going to give myself an opportunity. What do I mean? I didn't study particularly hard in grammar school. I didn't study hard in high school. And I just remember one of my high school teachers embarrassing me in front of a whole bunch of people in my class saying, you have a lot of talent, but I guess it seems cool to you to act like you're clueless and don't know anything and to act like you're dumb. And it hit me really hard when he said that. He pulled me to the side and he said, you're a bright kid. Why don't you start applying yourself, acting like it, doing what you're capable of doing? And I was like, yeah, whatever. But when I went to college, I decided I was going to do that. And, kind of the rest was history.
Wow, that's incredible. So interesting. You have a great legal career that we could talk about singularly, but I want to briefly touch on how you wound up. I know that you were a DA and in the DA's office, prosecutor. Did the fact that your father was a police officer actually make you, between that and just the practice of law in general and understanding that everyone has rights, did that actually ultimately lead you toward some of the work that you do now in terms of representing police unions and that kind of thing?
So it's a great question, and the answer is a resounding yes. My father wanted me to be a state trooper and or a police officer or whatever else, and that was his dream. It wasn't mine. And I just didn't have the temperament for it. I didn't have the ability to do that. I wasn't cut out for it. And then my dad, and I'm very open about this, got into some issues when he was a police officer. He ended up getting arrested and prosecuted himself. May he rest in peace now. And I remember they were investigating his unit, and they asked him to turn state's evidence, and he wouldn't. And so his friend did, who ended up getting out of everything. But my dad went to trial. There was a trial in the Bronx, and he ended up getting convicted of a misdemeanor, the felonies his lawyer got him out of. And he was excited that I did want to do law, not the police. He accepted it and pushed me towards it also when he found out that I had the interest. And he always used to tell me that every time you walk into a courtroom, you have an opportunity to save someone's life. Take that opportunity seriously, be prepared, do what you have to do, and years later, your clients will speak of you and remember you fondly for going to bat for them, fighting for them, and doing great things for them. And it's interesting because that's very true. And I'll just tell you a brief story. I was in court just the other day, and someone actually, crazily enough, pulled me to the side. He said, "Oh my God, oh my God." I said, "What? What?" He said, "You have a minute?" I said, "Sure." He said, "You actually represented me 21 years ago. You
Wow.
came to the police precinct, got me out of the police precinct, and took care of my case." And I run into people like that all the time. I was at a boxing match last year, and I had a correctional officer who now has a highfalutin job with the boxing commission say to me, "If it weren't for you, I wouldn't be where I am now. You took care of my case." So my dad was right. So I guess the moral of the story is each of us have a special responsibility. And if we take our, responsibilities like we should, and if we honor our commitment to be the best lawyers and people we can be, we could somehow make a difference. And that's what I try to do every day.
Fantastic. You would having more than 20 years, getting towards 30 years of practice. I think you came out of law school in 95 or so. You would have some perspective about how you have seen police cases go over the years, particularly as it pertains to the deference that police would, get. How much or how little is that changing? And is that a good thing and is that a bad thing? Answer that however you want, because you practice in it every day, but I'm sure you've seen some evolution there.
No, I've seen tremendous evolution, and I'll begin it where I left off with the last one in terms of my father. What he always used to tell me when he was an officer, before that hiccup came and he transitioned to the fire department, is he always told me that, with all the equipment he's given on his belt and nightsticks and guns and this, that, and the other, the most effective is his voice, to reason with people, to treat people with dignity and respect, to try to have some empathy for someone and just try to talk to them. He didn't discharge his weapon in years on his service because he would treat a person like they were a person. So I think that's very important, and I think that everyone, whether they're police or someone else, could really benefit from that advice. But particularly police, and to your question, I think it's an extremely good thing that we have accountability. I think a lot of that accountability is centers around what we're seeing. Right, we're in a technological age, and as a result, not only are there body cams that pick things up, but there are sky cams. Right, there's cameras everywhere that kind of note what you do. So unfortunately, I think a lot of the abuses that we've seen and are seeing have been around for a long time.
Sure.
Accountability has not been around for a long time. And so in terms of the changes I see people who are seeing things with their own eyes, namely jurors, who are disgusted by that and who are holding people accountable for that, particularly police officers. So gone are the days where police can do whatever they want, how they want, when they want, and expect just to skate. You have to answer for your conduct. And so I think, whether you're a police officer or anybody else, we're all accountable. And, I get and understand no one's perfect. And I would never indict the entirety of police, throughout this country who are working hard, keeping all of us safe, right? Keeping our communities safe and doing what they have to do. And I think they too are upset, by the disparagement of communities they're seeing from some of their colleagues. So not to indict, every police officer, but those who misstep. The reckoning is here. And so I think it's high time, with all the technology, that it's showing people what's happening. And what it's showing is inconsistent from what some police are writing in their documentation that they're presenting. And so they're having to be accountable in front of jurors. And I think that's always a great thing.
Questions like qualified immunity, et cetera, the things, for instance, in the George Floyd Justice and Policing Act, these are hard questions, right? They're not easy at all. Things like the George Floyd Justice and Policing Act and things like that, everybody's kind of talking about it and has an opinion, but most of us come from a standpoint of righteous indignation maybe and emotion for sure, right? You know what I mean? So how do we, as people and as lawyers, strike that balance, work the best way that we can within the system that we have, even while we try to improve it? You know what I mean? It's so hard to come out black and white, you know what I mean, and say we must do this and then that'll solve it. We must do that and that'll solve it. How do we navigate all of this and all the questions that are being asked about how to make police more accountable, how to be sure that they do what they're supposed to do? How do we strike the balances that we need to do?
Yeah, I think there's a very simple answer to that question, believe it or not. And we could talk all day and all night about the George Floyd Act and the relevant provisions and what it would do with police departments and qualified immunity and training and whatever you want. But, I think it was Lyndon Baines Johnson that said that you can't legislate morality, right? I mean,
Right.
you're either going to be a decent human being or you're not. You're either going to treat people with respect and humanity or you're not. You're either going to be a knucklehead or you're not. And so it doesn't take much, right, to be able to be courteous. I mean, I would argue that it takes a lot more energy to be mean-spirited and nasty than it does just to smile at someone, right? So I think the simple answer is by, having people who we want to talk about police. I mean, this is not a conversation limited to police. It's a conversation limited to our everyday interactions when we're walking down the street, when we're greeting people, when we're seeing people. Just be human, be polite, be nice, be deferential. Understand that it's not just you in the world. There are a lot of other people. People have to teach their, I think children and families this, right? What are we teaching our kids? Are we talking to them about how we respect whether a person shine your shoes or signs your check? Say good morning, say good afternoon, say how are you, right? Have some respectability for anyone else, right? Not judging people for who they are, what they wear, how they look, what their height is, their weight is, who they love, what their religion is. Like, just have some compassion. People are going to be different. And I think we're stronger in our diversity, right? So are we teaching this and are we talking about this throughout the kitchen table? Or are we preaching, right? Because that's where it starts, right? Right there with the family, because they're going to go out and they're going to mirror what they see, right? I could have told my son every day and every night, don't drink and drive, but don't ever drink. And then if I'm stumbling into the house every day, right, they're going to be like, what are you talking about? Right. So there's no perfect person, the least of which is me. But I think we have to lead by example. And if we're telling our kids and things that, we should walk the talk. And so I think that's the global answer to the question, is just being human with each other. And then after that, I mean, we could be more specific about relating it to police. Who are we recruiting to be police officers? How are we training them? Sure. What is the culture that we're really talking about with the police force? And are we in a culture where we're protecting each other and we're dismissing bad actors as, it's just another officer, just another day? Are we holding them to account, right? If you're not part of the solution, you're part of the problem. And so how much injustice happens because people, and that's another saying, right? The people of goodwill just stand by and do nothing. So, I don't think it's that complicated. And yes, there's legislation we can talk about, but absent legislation, would legislation have prevented the Tyree Nichols from getting assaulted in the way that he did by those officers? Like, I don't care whether George Floyd was in effect, not in effect, or any other bill. Like, why are you running up to the car, throwing F-bombs and pulling somebody out? What happened to, good evening, sir, may I see your license and registration? That's where it starts. So, yeah, we can talk about it all day and all night, but I'm just one who just believes that, you gotta respect your neighbor and friend, and one response begets another. And if your response is hostile, the other person's is not going to be humane either, and it's going to blow up, and it's going to blow up to these horrific instances that we see.
Yeah, that's a good word. So just like being a lawyer kind of happened by accident, I read somewhere that you being a commentator happened by accident as well. You just practicing law, minding your business, and you get a call from the Fox News Channel. Is that how it went? Really?
Yeah, that's kind of how it was. I mean, it's life is crazy. So a lot of times, we get good breaks, and just relating it to the whole legal career, I would encourage everyone and anyone to have a mentor and someone who could steer them in the right direction, right? We all need advice. We all need guidance. We all need someone who counsels us, develops us, works with us. And I was fortunate as an 18-year-old freshman in college to run into a lawyer who he happened to be a lawyer, and I figured, listen, let me give this lawyer thing a try. I'm not really good at anything else, and so let me see if this will work for me. But he was very good at teaching me how to be, how to apply myself and how to think more clearly, and how to be a human being, right? And also how to he just kind of refined me. I could remember going out, and I'll pivot directly to the CNN issue, but I could remember having dinner with him and his family, and I'm like, this is disgusting, Ian. And he's like, no, it's not that it's disgusting, Joe. It's not to your taste. And so little things like that, which teach you how to how to comport yourself. And so, he was instrumental in terms of getting me on the right track. And then, of course, we're going to pick a profession. We have to really have passion about it. We want to really have to do it. We have to apply and commit ourselves to it and to work as hard as we can and deal with many adversities. But I'll tell you that it was that simple as it related to my commentator career. I was driving on the Grand Central, and I had gotten a phone call. And I remember clearly it was about OJ, which I call OJ2, which is he stole his Heisman trophies or some such thing.
Right.
And so they were prosecuting him. And I could recall getting a call from Fox News. And they said, hey, can you come in and talk about this? And I was I'm like, what do you mean? I don't represent OJ. I don't practice in Vegas. I don't know anybody who's involved in the case. And I spent like 5 minutes telling him, like, why are you calling me? And fortunately, there was the most wonderful young lady who I'm very good friends with now, who was very kind and polite and understanding of my cluelessness. She said, no, I understand, but we've done some research. We came across your website. We think you'd be good just to give perspective. We know you don't represent OJ. We know you're not part of the legal team. We know you this, we know that. We just want to know if you want to come in and talk about it, because your website looks pretty impressive. It looks like you prosecuted and defended. And so would you consider doing that? And I said, yeah, sure. So I came in to do some commentating on that. And one thing led to another, because when you're on TV, it's not a secret. And then different networks call you, et cetera. And, things ended up working themselves out into, a contract to do commentary.
That's amazing. I mean, I know you've commentated on some of everything, and I'm kind of young in this game in the commentary side, but one of the things I was really interested at and moved by, OJ, for some of us generationally, kind of started the TV consumption, even though there was Perry Mason, even though I watched Matlock. Me and my sister would get in things about, she wanted to watch Who's the Boss and Growing Pains, and I wanted to watch Matlock. That came on at the same time, Tuesday at 8. But it's amazing to me how much consumption there is around celebrity-related issues. Does society's fascination with that, because I know you've covered a lot of those, the biggest thing I've seen so far is probably Amber Heard and Johnny Depp. You know what I mean? Like, does that create cause for concern, like our fascination with that as a society?
Yeah, I think that there's something about crime itself that brings about fascination, the criminal mind. Why would people do what they do? Because it's, I'd argue that it's not only celebrity crime. I'd argue that the criminal becomes a celebrity as a result of the crime that, they commit. We've seen that over and over again, right? If you look even back to Jodi Arias, the one who killed Travis Alexander in Arizona, she's just an average person. And that case was like, oh my goodness, the world starts focusing, and she becomes a celebrity as a result of her crime. You look at Casey Anthony, right? What Jose Baez was involved in, and boom, who was she? Casey Anthony. And, she becomes this big celebrity because of the crime she committed. We could go on and on. So I think it's a fascination with crime itself that people are just riveted by, why people do the horrific and inhumane, terrible things they do. And there's sort of a fascination with it. So there's a marketplace for it. I'll just say, toggling back, though, and relating it and covering all of these cases, and I would encourage anybody who's interested in law, who's interested in commentating or anything else, to stay the course. Nothing happens overnight. And I could remember it wasn't until 5 years after I got that initial phone call that I was offered a TV contract. I was doing commentating for 5 years for free. They sent a nice car to my house. They sent it to get me to the studio. I showed up in court thereafter in a nice car and got home in one because, they take you around. but they paid me not a nickel, and I was not offered a contract for 5 years. So a lot of times people get into it, and 3 months later they're like, "Oh, I'm a failure." I'm like, "Relax, I did it for 5 years before I was offered the opportunity, not even for a contract, but to try out, right, with a number of other people to see whether or not they would give me a contract." And so the reason I just say that and I make that pivot is because there may be some who are interested in law, right? It's a long road. And just because one exam doesn't go well or this or that doesn't go well, it's all good. You're going to finish law school. You're going to pass the bar. Life's going to be fine. But just stay the course. And if I would have, after the second year, said, "This is crazy, I'm not doing this," then I'm paying me. After the third year, it's over. After the fourth year, it took 5. And it's like the old saying, you're right there at the gold mine, and the gold mine is like a half an inch. You just have to scratch off a half of an inch more to get there. And people say, "I'm not doing it." They'll walk away. And little did they know that if they kept clawing and scratching, right there it would be there. So, again, I just encourage everyone to stay the course, believe what you can do, believe in yourself, keep working, don't give up, chase your dreams. And there's a light at the end of the tunnel if you do.
Talk a little bit, if you will, about the importance of responsible legal commentary in the media for the public. One of the things that I notice about you, Joey, is that, you'll get asked a question and you're at point A and the question is asking you to get to point B, but you make stops along the way. You are incredibly descriptive. Even this morning you were talking about the first hearing and the Tyree Nichols with the defendants, and people that are listening to you commonsensically can go away knowing more, much more, in simple terms than they knew before, and that creates an opportunity in the commentary, to inform, to give people, here's the process. There's a process. We know how you feel, but there's a process. As a court officer, it must carry over those underlying responsibilities into your commentary. Do you think about that while you're doing it?
So, I do. I think there's a couple of things to be said. First, relating to me, and then just relating in general. I was an adjunct professor for a period of years. And why is that relevant? It's relevant because what you do as a professor, right, I taught contracts and constitutional law, is that you try to take complicated concepts and you try to make them easily digestible to students who are trying to understand it, right? And so the reason I mention that is because one of the things I tell young people all the time is that every job they have, whether it's your dream job or some other job, there are things that you can take from that will carry you so far in your life. And that's why everything you do, you should live in the moment. You should be the best at whatever you're doing as you work to get to something else. But I found that experience in breaking things down in a classroom and trying to have young people understand how it relates to what we're talking about and the larger issues helped me not only, right, in TV commentary, but it helped me, quite frankly, when I do jury trials, right? Your jurors are everyday human beings from different points and walks of life who want to understand, and you want them to be able to relate to your client's experience. And so you have to be descriptive. You have to tell a story. You have to be relatable. You have to be rational, right? You have to draw conclusions that everyone can understand, not speak like, you're in the Supreme Court of the United States in front of, 9 justices. So that's important, right? And so in terms of responsible commentary, what does that mean to me? Everybody can make their own decisions, and I'm not there to persuade anyone to believe A or believe B. What I try to do as best I can is I try to, right, give a rendition factually of the issues that are involved, try to be descriptive with respect to those facts, try to break down, the different sides and everything else that are involved, and try to come out at some rational conclusion. And sometimes I get that done and other times I don't, but that's always the kind of approach, not to advocate, but just to tell you, I'm going to give you my point of view, but I'm going to try to go through with you logically how I kind of got there. And I think, that's in my mind, and everyone has a different description, but that's what that's what responsible commentary, in my view, is all about.
You know, you mentioned jury trials and juries, connecting to juries. I had a question about that. How has your jury selection and your communication with juries evolved over the years, particularly given the potential distractions, right? Like, you know, statistically speaking, they're probably getting on their phone, you know, if not at lunch, but, you know, but later on. It's very easy to get on the internet now without knowing you're doing it. You know, so you're competing against a lot more. How do you approach jury selection, given the potential for distractions and all of the things that are out there? And then even you, somebody like you, do you deal with the elephant in the room? Like, how many of y'all see me on television? Y'all didn't like what I said. You know what I mean? Like, you know, how do you deal with that?
So the judge will usually, do something like that. But, just in terms of, hey, do you know any of these parties? And if you do, will anything that, anything distract you from the facts of the case, right? Whether you agreed or disagreed with anything he said, it's about the case. But I think, it's interesting. I had a judge in, it was Nassau County out on Long Island, um, you know, very, very nice woman. And she, it was a winter trial a few years ago, more than a few years ago. And she used to let me hang up my coat in her chambers and everything else. And very fair to both sides, but just very welcoming because she wanted, things to run as they should run. And she said to me and my adversary, she said, counselors, I view this as an opportunity to be entertained. If you entertain me for the next few weeks, we're not going to have any problems. If you don't entertain me, we're going to have significant problems. So, she said it kind of in jest, but that's the reality. People have a lot of distractions. And my view of the world is that if they're not interested in what I have to say, that's on me. If I'm not making the case to keep their interest, to make sure that they're laser being focused on what I'm talking about, that's on me. If I'm not pointing to the right exhibits or making their life entertaining while they're there, that's on me. And so I think that despite the distractions and everything that everything has, if you can really grip someone and fashion your arguments in a way where you're bringing them there, where you're giving color commentary to what you're talking about, where you're making yourself relatable, while you're making the facts interesting, while you're trying to be dynamic, while you're bringing in all of the elements to establish and in my job, my lack of guilt of the client, lack of guilt with respect to who the client is, then, right, that's what it's all about, right? If you're at a Broadway show, you're not looking at your watch, you're not checking this, you're not looking at your cell phone, you're engaged in the performance. And so a lot of what we do as lawyers is we're performers, right? That's the reality. And what I mean by that is I don't mean in a non-authentic way, but I mean like, look, this is what I'm doing, and I'm looking at every juror, and I'm marching down, and I'm, showing them whatever exhibits I have, and I'm going through the facts and the evidence and the issues, and it's on me. If I do that well, they'll pay attention. Not that they'll always agree with what I'm saying, but they'll pay attention. And if I do it poorly, then they won't. And that's not their responsibility. Apparently, they just, weren't engaged, and I should have kept them more engaged.
Yeah. So Tyree Nichols, I mean, where do you even start? Tell me what your general reaction was and to just hearing that this happened again, and what are your thoughts on how we can really make this a teaching moment, not only in terms of legal process, but from a societal standpoint? I mean, I feel like we've been here before, but, how do we even start to unpack that? I know you've been talking about it a lot, but, how can we connect the dots to get at some of these larger things that hopefully allow us to put this in the proper perspective and hopefully, in the best of worlds, make this kind of thing happen less?
Yeah, I guess to answer the first part of the question, I guess my reaction was not unlike so many others throughout the country, no matter your race, nationality, religion, point of view, sexual orientation. It's hard not to look at that tape and not be disgusted, not feel a sense of just incredible, just it's just really hard to describe. Incredible disappointment, incredible frustration, just incredible sense of where are we in society that could happen. Putting aside the question of, oh, it was black officers and not white officers, there were people doing that to another person. And that is really tough to stomach. And you wonder how we got there. Like, it just, to me, I mean, wow, just how could a person do that to another person? So it was really disappointing and upsetting to watch and to see that unfold. I remember I was on set and I watched it like the rest of the country as it was, as we were just being shown the videotape upon its release. And there's a lot of emotions that were involved in that. In terms of where we go from there, yeah, I think every moment's a teachable moment. No one, especially him, should die in vain. And I think it opens up a discussion of where are we getting these people who we're giving badges and guns to? Where are they coming from? What are they learning? What are they doing? How are they policing? What is their sense of compassion? What is their sense of humanity? What is their sense of understanding? Right? Sometimes the clients and everyone doesn't need anyone to agree with them. They just want to be listened to. I can't even begin to tell you how many times I speak to a client and they'll go off the reservation about something totally irrelevant, right, to what we're talking about, but they just want to be heard. And so allow them that. Allow them to go off the reservation if it's not relevant to exactly what it is that I need from them, but it's just part of the human experience, right? People are not robots. And so why do I say that? Because every job is a certain amount of discretion, right? Some people feel they've engaged in injustices. And I understand police are not social workers and psychologists and everything else, but in some respects we all are. Bartender is, my barber is, I am, you are, right? As lawyers, we do that. Just listen to people. So I think that we're going to have to get into a situation where officers not only respect the public they're serving, but just have a little bit more compassion and decency and humanity. There's no question about it. Final prong of this is that police need communities as much as communities need police. And unless we get to the point where police are going to be trusted by communities and the communities are going to trust the police, there's always going to be this disconnect. And so I'm hopeful that this is a turning point, as there's been so many. Although, I'll be talking later about the 23-year-old in Louisiana I'll be talking about another shooting, which is just growing tired. But in any event, it pulls you into a different place. I just think that we really have to have a discussion around who we're giving badges and guns to, what are we teaching and training them to do, how are they relating to communities, and how are those communities relating to officers in a way that helps everybody go forward, live in peace, and just kind of build a better society. We're in a tough place.
Yeah. The one and only Joey Jackson. Sir, you are appreciated, admired, respected, so on and so forth. Thank you for the work that you do and for, reaching back, not only with the community, but with, younger lawyers and, setting that example. So I much appreciate you taking the time with me while you're doing your thing in the middle of it. It's great to catch up with you and a privilege. Thank you, sir.
I appreciate you more. We're so delighted to meet you. Grateful for all the work that you do as a lawyer, right? As a person who, just has so much respect from other lawyers and your peers and from people in general. But not only that, but as a family man and as a person who, has a family and knows what that is, has a wife and knows what that is. Why do I laugh? Because before we were having a conversation before we came on about, hey, listen, I just do what my wife tells me. Does that sound familiar? You said that, didn't you?
I sure did.
So, and I said, you know what? I follow the same thinking as you do. So that's why I chuckled when I said has a wife and that type thing. But, you do a lot, and you do a lot of great things, and they're really not taken for granted. And, you don't have to be in front of cameras or lights or on CNN set to make a difference. And not that you won't be soon,
right,
but you're making a great difference in doing your podcast and the great work that you do. So thanks for taking the time with me.
Thank you, my friend. I appreciate it.